Good morning, my friends. Today, it's a very cold, sunny day, and right now there's not a cloud in the sky, which is very nice. I went for a walk earlier because it was sunny, so I decided it would be nice, but it's actually very cold. It's very, very frigid. Last night I had work, and it like changed throughout the course of my work. Like I walked out over there, it was snowing. I'd say maybe it was like 1, 2 degrees, maybe. It was cold, obviously, but not like brutally cold. And I walked to work and it was fine. And then as the day progressed, people kept coming in. Eventually, towards the end, they were like, "Oh my God, it's so cold! It's so cold!" And I'm like, "What the?" Like, what's the big deal? It's not that cold. I was outside earlier. And then I finally walked home and checked the weather for a specific temperature. It was like down to -10 by the time I got out. So I went down like 10 degrees over the course of only like a few hours, probably, which is pretty crazy. It's still that way today. I went outside and walked into the little forest area behind me. Everything's covered in snow and ice. It's nice. Winter has officially kind of arrived, so to speak. It sort of has that like strong feeling. We've had hints of it throughout the fall. You get that little winter chill sort of come in, but today is like kind of like the first day. It sort of set its mark for us here, which is I guess a good thing. It's not something I'm complaining about. So today I'm going to talk about specifically words. Words. It's going to kind of breach into a little bit of the subject of ideology a little bit, but I'm talking about words specifically in terms of definitions, how we come to understand words. And I think there's a lot of problems with how people interpret words, specifically on the academic side of things. For one thing, I think there's a weird war on words specifically. They don't really have anything of substantial meaning. We just sort of use these words as scapegoats to understand things that we don't like. One of those things can be capitalism, could be communism, could be Nazism, racism. A lot of these isms, obviously, but they're still just kind of words. Or we can just say we hate winter. Let's say a lot of people don't like winter. A lot of people hate, I don't know, Nickelback, right? Nickelback. I've never even really listened to Nickelback, and yet I hold this view of hating Nickelback because other people hate it. I don't actually dislike Nickelback. I just dislike the name Nickelback because of what other people say. And I think that's an interesting thing, is that a lot of people have these problems against words, and they don't really fully understand what they are. And I'm not talking about them on an academic side. I'm talking specifically, it's like, what do you don't like specifically? And I think a lot of people don't actually know what they dislike. They say they'll dislike this word, but when you say, all right, break it down, what specifically do you don't like? And you have to explain yourself what exactly you don't like. And there's people who obviously can explain things that they don't like, but they're not necessarily rooted in what the word means, or what the word is supposed to represent. A lot of times people dislike things about a word, and then another person likes something, says they like that word, but they're looking at it from a completely different point of view. This happens a lot with political ideology. You have the concept of people who hate socialism because it centralizes businesses. It limits the freedoms that people have to start businesses, and it creates a lot of pressure on people that they have to go through the government, and the government controls and dictates what the business does. And that's an aspect that people generally dislike about socialism. But then you have the other person who likes socialism, but they don't think about that other side of it, of what the other person disliked. They're looking at it from the perspective of, they like it because it gives you free health care and free education. You're looking at it from two different points of view of things, and then you're just lumping it into this word. And then when you say like, oh, I like socialism, I don't like socialism, oh, we hate each other now. There's no concept of actually agreeing on anything because you're both just looking at the word. You're not looking at the actual things that encompass that word, that you can't like dissect it fully and look at it from a clear perspective. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the concept of words in terms of definition, right? You have the definition of the word, which is generally, when you're looking at complex things, specifically academically, you have, a lot of philosophers, Western philosophy specifically, feel the need that they have the authority to define words as to what they are, despite what people might understand them as. I had this problem with someone I was like talking to, and we were talking about belief, and I said, oh, I believe, I don't even know what we were talking about. I said something like, I believe that, like, let's just say I believe in the Big Bang, right, which is a purely plausible theory. It's very accepted in even religious and scientific thought. It's very common. And he said to me, that's not what belief is, because belief means that you ascribe to something without logic, or something that cannot, or like that's illogical. There's like an ulterior explanation that's logical, and you're avoiding that in order to believe. And I was like, well, I don't I don't ascribe to whatever that is, that definition is. I understand what belief is, to just believe in something. It's something that isn't actually proven fully 100%. So all you can do is just say, okay, that makes sense. I guess that it's like kind of like a guess. You believe in it beyond yourself, beyond something that's fact. You don't really believe the sun will rise. You just sort of know it because you've seen it before. So it's not even a belief in that sense. A belief is more like something like aliens exist, right? I believe aliens exist. That's not beyond logic. There's plenty of logic to conclude that it does exist. We just don't have the evidence for it, right? So anyway, I kind of had that, but he was taking it from the academic standpoint of what belief meant, which is something that I disagreed with. And I think that's an important thing that I believe in that definitions don't come from a higher sense of authority. It doesn't matter how many PhDs you have, whatever the fuck, it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, how high social standing you have no authority to dictate words. What words mean come from a general understanding from everyone around us, all right? If you're writing a dictionary, that's basically your job. Your job isn't to come up with definitions for words. It's to analyze how people use these words in conversation and find a definition that's reflective of that. You're not dictating the definition. You're receptive of it, all right? It's coming to you, and you're just trying to use it and describe it in a way that makes sense, that's receptive of what other people are using it for. And that's, it changes once you get into more complex words that people don't really use anymore. And these are kind of like dead words, which you can sort of use in an academic sense, which is perfectly fine. But when you're talking about simplistic words like belief or accidental can mean a completely different thing in philosophical terms. It causes more confusion. You're basically constructing a new language to suit your needs, which is fine if you're doing it in an essay and you make it clear about what word means what before the essay so that people understand what you're reading about, which I think is important, although I think it's better if you just come up with words that are already used to define those definitions instead of just taking words that exist and then redefining them. I think it's a little bit odd for me. So overall, this happens a lot. People say like, oh, you don't know what this means. I know the academic version of what this word means, and this is what it means. And it's like, no, like that's not how it works. It works based off of what other people think it to be, right? You can't just like have an academic hierarchy and say this is what the word means. It doesn't work like that. You have to have there needs to be a balance, right? Between what the average person is generally using that word and trying to understand that in conversation, and the meaning of a word can change throughout all time, and we need to adjust to that meaning. And I think there's a lack of that in today's world. We see a lack of wanting to accept different changes because we're afraid of losing the rigid nature of our language. We don't want it to become too segregated in dialect, but I think that's sort of not really going to happen as the internet sort of expands and more people are in tune with how the internet is used, how in tune we are with the slang. Eventually, just the dialects that come from specific regions are generally going to fade away as more people are sort of used to talking to each other through the internet medium. So but like words, the definitions change throughout what they mean. If you, let's say cool is the most popular one, right? We say cool as to mean, right, it's lower in temperature, but that's not what it's come to mean nowadays. When we say someone is cool, we sort of have a deep understanding of what that word means. It means someone who's sort of like separate. I can't even define it really in terms of what cool means in that regard. I have to be a linguist or whatever that job title would be. Someone who's really good at defining those terms. So anyway, I'll leave it at that, and I hope you have a wonderful day.